Hello, I am Moodida, and welcome back to Satisfactory. This is the 5th episode in a series of videos that will go over a lot of my blueprints. I'm using a separate save that I call my Blueprint Playground. This has every advanced game setting turned on, making this effectively creative mode. I want to show off how these are made in case you want to make your own or edit these ones to fit your needs. In the last episode, I covered the blueprints for blenders and manufacturers. Today, I'm going to go over how I build my pagoda-like towers. These blueprints are free to use, and the link to the Google Drive is in the description. Early in the game, when you unlock the logistics milestone, it tells you to start adding verticality to your factories. I really took that to heart in my load balance save, as you can see. And I've built most of the manufacturing right on top of the miner. This drastically cuts down on that initial belt length. I also really like this because it saves a lot of the wide open space for later on when you really need it. Let me show you how I've made these simple blueprints. To start pretty much every tower, I'm going to use the same blueprint, so let me show you how I did it. So, really creative name, just floor 1, it's for the miner. So, the way this works is it takes up the entire 4x4. I've got one door, and on the opposite side, and basically the opposite corner, I've got a double wall outlet. And I'll show off how to run the power throughout the tower later. To make this, it's really simple. So I basically just started with a row of walls all around the outside. And then from each corner, I'm going to go up 4 more. This is basically the minimum height as far as full walls and foundations go. You could probably drop it another meter if you really wanted to cut it close, but the miner won't clip into any of the foundations if it's this tall. So that's how tall for the miner, and then every other floor is going to be a little bit shorter. So just place one just so I can place this here, and then I just delete it, and then I just fill in the whole top. So the reason I like to use full foundations instead of using say a 1 meter, because that would obviously shrink the height of the whole tower if I only made the floors 1 meter instead of the full 4. Even though I'm using fly mode, I like to be able to make my towers traversable and walkable without having to use the fly mode. So I generally add a whole bunch of stairs, and stairs are each 4 meters tall. So if I wanted to, I could make these 2 meter foundations, and that would cut down the height a little bit. And then I could use ramps instead. Those only rise by 2 meters for each one, but I'd much rather be able to climb a little bit higher. So if I keep everything basically 4 meters in height, I can use stairs and it'll all fit together really nicely. Let's run through the different building blocks for the rest of the towers. So this right here is if I want a 6x6. So as you can see, the blueprints are labeled by how big the floor is going to be. The initial tower is only going to be a 4x4, and then I have the choice of going to 6x6, 8x8, I could do a 9x9, 10x10, 12x12, and I'll show you how these kind of fit together later. But let me show you how I made these. So since each floor is going to be 4 foundations tall, easiest way is to not build it right in the middle. It's to just start on one of the corners. So I'm going to go up 4 foundations, 4 foundations, and then depending on if this is going to be a 3 or a 4, you place 2 or 3 more. So if I was recreating that one, I would just do this, and then grab the floor, and then I'm just going to make a 3x3 grid. And there we go, and that's the floor. So as you can see, that was the 3x3. This one is a 4x4. So when I join 4 of these together, I'm either going to have a 6x6 square or an 8x8. To get a 9x9 floor, I'm going to use this 6x6, so just like I labeled it here. Each one of these will be in the corner, and then to make up all of the empty gaps, I'll use this blueprint, which is at the right height, because the blueprint designer will remember how high it is, and this whole thing is basically the blueprint box. Even though this whole space is empty, it's part of the blueprint. And then that way this will snap right in next to these ones. To make a 10x10 floor, it's almost the exact same thing. We're going to use these in each of the corners, And then this, which is a 3x4, will fill in all of the outside holes with the wall included. And then you'll be left with a 4x4 hole in the middle to fill in. And for the last and biggest tower that I've made, I haven't found a reason to make them any bigger than this, but using this combo can get you a 12x12 floor. So we start with using the 8x8 floor, which is just the 4x4, and this is going to go in all four corners. And then to fill in the gaps in the middle, we're going to use this 12x12, which is the 8x8 plus this one. Obviously, this will be a lot easier to understand with some examples. So let's go over here and use some of these iron nodes. So to build my towers, I always hold down Control so I can snap to the global grid. And then I'm going to place down a 4x4. So a lot of times I'll place down kind of a 3x3, which will cover up most of the node, and that's kind of the goal. So here in the dune desert, we run into, surprise, surprise, some dunes. And throughout the world, it's rarely ever completely flat and convenient, so you're going to deal with this sort of a thing pretty often. Then I'm going to grab the miner. So the way I've set it up is so that the arrow is going to be where the door is. So depending on where you want the door, in this case, if I wanted it to be facing this way, I'd place it here, just swap the door to this side. Or what I can do is I can just have it face this way, and I'll have to worry about it. So we go ahead and slap that down. And as you can see, it fits a miner inside just fine. So there's still a little bit of space, so no need to worry about the clipping. And we can just go ahead and place this there. Because I have all the advanced game settings, I forget every time. They automatically turn on because you just have free power. Now from here, I have to decide how big the tower is going to be. So in some very rare cases, especially maybe in the early game, I can use a very just small 4x4 tower if that's all the space I need. Now 4x4 is enough space for either 3 or 4 machines basically on each floor. If you're doing smelters and constructors, obviously as the machines get bigger, you can fit less and less. You're only going to be able to fit probably 2 foundries, 2 assemblers, and obviously the belting gets a little bit tighter and tighter, but it is possible in the early game to only need a few machines for whatever you're doing. So if you're lucky, you can just spam that on top, but that's pretty rare. So most of the time what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add an extra layer of foundation. So this now, if I went just one extra foundation all the way around, we now have a 6x6. So if I was going to place the 6x6 tower, I'm going to take it off blueprint mode because that blueprint's kind of in the center and it's not going to snap to where you want. So I pretty much always use H. If it lines up right here in the center, you're good, but you can always just take a look around and make sure everything is lined up correctly. And then once the first one is placed, then I'll put it back into blueprint mode and I can really easily snap all of the tower parts to each other. So that would be one floor, and if I had a whole bunch of floors, because what I'm going to do is do the math ahead of time and figure out how many floors I'm going to need. And then I'll just be able to kind of spam this down. Okay, so let me give you a realistic example, and then I'll show you a bigger tower and kind of how that fits together too. Okay, so for this example, we're going to make 20 reinforced iron plates. So to do that, I need 8 smelters, which this is where you kind of have to make a decision how you want your tower to look. So I could either make the whole thing wider to fit the 8 smelters, or I could make a really compact blueprint to fit all 8 smelters on one floor. For me, since all of the other blueprints would easily fit in the 6x6, I'm just going to make the smelters take up 2 floors, and then I'll need 1 for the iron plates, 1 for the rods, 1 for screws, and then 1 last one for the reinforced iron plates. So I'll need 6 floors in total. So let me show you how I do that. So we've already got the 1 floor. So this would be 2, 3, 4, 5, and then that's 6 total. And then real easy, now I can just fill in all the other corners. And that's the bulk of the tower. So if we come down here, the one thing I do want to show you, this is how I do it. Now there's obviously a whole bunch of different ways you could do this. Since I made the tower bigger, if it was still a 4x4, I could just run it straight up. But this is kind of how I branch it around. So I'll lay down a bunch of these normal wall outlets to get around here. And then I'm going to switch it back to the double wall outlet. And then from those, I'm going to run it all the way up. So this way, I'm going to be able to run power to every single floor. And what I'll do a lot of the time is I'll throw a power tower on top, run the power straight through the floor, and then connect it to here. And then it makes it really easy to connect tower to tower, and you don't have to clutter up the ground with a whole bunch of them. Now, because this looks a little bit funny, what I like to do is grab the big metal pillar, and you could either add it right to the edge, but I kind of like giving it a little bit of depth. And so I'll add it in 1 meter from each side, and I'll do this on all 4 corners to make it look a little bit more supported and complete. Now I have one last set of blueprints to go over. So these 3 and these 3 are the exact same. The difference is whether it's grip metal or asphalt, because those are the 2 that I generally use. Obviously, it's really easy to change the material, change it to whatever color you want to use. But this is how I do my outside walkways. So they're really simple blueprints. It's just 3 half 1 meter foundations and then some railing on the top. And I have it for either, this is 3, I have one that's just a 2, which is just that, and then I have a 4, which is obviously 4 foundations long. So super simple, and the way they kind of fit onto my towers. If I've got a 6x6 floor, I know that one side can just be really easily 2 of my 3s, and I can just do this all the way up. Now blueprint mode doesn't work because the bounding boxes for these are just not quite in the right spot for that to work. So unfortunately you do just kind of have to manually place each one, but they snap really easily. So if this side is going to be 6, I'll generally make the opposite side 6 just to make my life a lot easier. So we're just going to snap these right here. And so on the other 2 sides, I now have the same 6, but I've added 2 half foundations. So I basically need 7. So if I just do 3, running up the side, I can then switch to my 4. And that will complete it. I just decided to go ahead and leave a lot of these as flexible as possible. And so you do kind of have to go through, each corner is going to have a gap. And a smart thing would be to change the color ahead of time. On the towers that only use the 3x3 foundation, you could include all of these, and then you wouldn't have to manually place them afterwards. Unfortunately, if it's going to be the 4x4 foundation, this is going to be the way you're going to want to do it. Or you're just going to have to split this up into smaller chunks. And that's how I would build a 6x6 tower. It's going to make 20 reinforced iron plates a minute. So let's look at another example. Say you're a little bit later in the game and you need something that's going to handle quite a bit more. If you wanted to make 50 reinforced iron plates, I might suggest not using the default recipe, but for this example, it makes it pretty simple. I'll need 20 smelters, a total of 40 constructors, and 10 assemblers. Since I know a 5 smelter blueprint will fit in a 4x4 area, I can easily fit 10 smelters in an 8x8. Now with the next step, I have 10 constructors for iron rods. I would need a 10x10 floor to fit those all on one floor, which sounds tempting. However, I need 15 constructors for iron plates. I'm not going to build a 15x15 tower for this sort of a thing. We're just going to go up. I need the same amount for screws, and then with 10 assemblers, I'm probably going to want to use a 5 assembler blueprint. So I'm going to want to do 2 floors of 5. And that one is going to dictate how big my tower is going to be. So if I quickly throw down a set of those blueprints, I can get an idea of exactly how big we need. So it's only 7 foundations. So for this, we only need an 8x8 tower. But just to show off more of the blueprints, I'm just going to make this a 10x10. We now have a supervisor. So like all of them, start with this first blueprint. If I add 1 all the way around, that's a 6x6. Here's an 8x8. And here's the size of the 10x10. Quite a bit of space to work with. So for the 10x10 floors, it's going to be the 6x6 plus this one. So I'm going to go ahead and throw down this in each corner. And then I'll go ahead and switch to that other blueprint. And with this one, we can go back to blueprint mode and snap it to the corners. And then we're just left with this 4x4 hole in the middle. And so hopefully you have a number of different 4x4 blueprints. For some reason, my only one for concrete on this save is white, so we're just gonna have it be a different color, but that's fine. So unfortunately, because of the height of each of these blueprints, you won't be able to use blueprint mode to snap it in, but it should place pretty easily. So with this example and this size tower, I'm still going to need 2 floors for smelters. For iron plates, I'm going to need 2 floors. For the iron rods, I actually could fit it all on 1 floor since there's only 10. For screws, we're still going to need 2 floors. And 2 floors for the reinforced iron plates. And that's often how I'll kind of scale it up, is I'll just kind of go line by line how many floors I need. Now I'm not locked into where each things go, but as long as I get it the right height so I have enough room for all the machines, that's the important part. And there you go. Even though I'm sure I sped up a bunch of that, you can build these towers really quickly with the blueprints. I would just need to go around and add all of the walkways, but that really doesn't take too long. As a general rule of thumb, once I build the whole tower, I usually go through my colors and I'll color coordinate this for whatever node it's on. If this was coal, I would leave this black, but since it's on an iron node, I would change it to like a light gray or something like that. But obviously that's the fun part of this game, is there's just so many options. Finding the ones that work best for you will make a huge difference. So if you can speed up some of the tedious part of building some of these things, you can just get to the fun part, like load balancing all of the machines across all of the floors. All in all, super simple blueprints. They have a lot of room. You could add quite a bit more detail or decorations and all sorts of things. I'm just waiting for more of the optimization to happen before I really go crazy with decorations, so I try to keep these as bare bones as possible. So I hope this inspires you to build your own tower blueprints. Mine are available for free on the Google Drive. The link is in the description, and if you do use those, I hope they serve you well. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, or haikus, let me know in the comments below. The next video in this series will be going over the blueprints I use to build out my rail network. So look forward to that, and thanks for watching.